Hello everyone, my name is Idiotic Synergy, and today we are going to talk about the Regimental Preacher, also known as the Ministerium Priest. Now, I'm not just going to talk about the model, because as you can probably tell, the model is very dated. In fact, it's still being made out of metal, as shown down here. It is still an old metal model. Luckily though, it's in one chunk of metal, so there's no gluing metal, which is good, but again, it's metal, and I'm pretty sure it's so old that it's got lead in it. So, the model isn't that impressive. However, I do kind of like it in a derpy sort of way because it is very old, and I'm the sucker for old models. But if you want a decent priest model, just pick up a Redemptionist from Necromunda, because the Redemptionists are just really cool looking and they fit with the theme. Anyway, why I wanted to talk about the Preacher is because of what he can do in game. Now, if we look at his stats, they're not the best. I mean, his movement is 6, which is quite fast for him, which is, I thought it would be movement 5. But no, he moves 6 inches. Weapon skill and ballistic skill is 4. Strength 3, toughness 3, wounds 4, attacks 3, leadership 8, and save of a 6+. Now, that just sounds like an average guard model, right? So why am I talking about it? Well, you see, what makes this model interesting is what it can do in game. And not only does it have Warrior Zealot, where if it gets charged or you charge it, he can re-roll the hit roll. It's not even the fact he's got a 4-up invulnerable save, it's this, Righteous Rhetoric, which I find fascinating. The reason I find it fascinating is because how it works. What you do is you pick one Imperial Guard core unit or an Imperial Guard infantry unit within 6 inches of the priest, or preacher, depending how you want to call him, and then you roll a dice. On a 3, select one of the following. And this is where it gets interesting, because you get this one. Until the start of the next command phase, add 1 to the charge roll made for that unit, and each time that model in that unit makes a melee attack, you can re-roll the hit roll. That's useful. But the one I find brilliant is this one. Until the start of your next command phase, models in that unit have a 6-up invulnerable save, and cannot be affected by malediction psychic powers. Now, you probably might think, well, what's a malediction psychic power? Basically, it seems like there's 3 types of psychic power most armies have. You have blessings, which help buff your own army. You have Witchfire, which just gives out more wounds. And then you've got Malediction, which acts as a debuff for your opponent's units. It's basically a debuff. Having a unit that gets to switch that off, and it even says if they are currently being affected by malediction powers, the effects of those units immediately cease to apply in that to models in that unit. Basically, it's brilliant. And I think it gets overlooked a lot, because having something that can turn off debuffs is incredibly useful for 40k, and it is only 40 points, and you can bring more than one. Granted, if you want a decent model, you might have to use a Redemptionist, and Necromunda models are scaled slightly different to Imperial Guard. However, I think it would be really cool to have a bunch of these guys with some Ogren, because if you got if you're fighting an enemy unit that just debuffs, in fact, Chaos Demons also have quite a few malediction powers as well. So if you're fighting a enemy unit that has a ton of like debuff psychic powers, then having a preacher that just switches them off is really useful. And again, you can bring more than one. You can bring 3, 4. Basically, there's no limit. So you could easily have sort of an anti-psyker army where the person is forced to either buff themselves or just try and do mortal wounds. it's I think it's incredibly underrated. Personally, I think that having that is great, and not enough people know about it, and that's why I made this video, because it's a really cool thing that this model can do, and I kind of hope they update this model. I mean, I love it to bits, but there needs to be an update, or just use a Redemptionist. Redemptionists are always cool. Anyway, short little PSA video. I've been Idiotic Synergy, and I'll see you next time. Remember, take care, stay safe, and look after each other. Bye for now.